In the heart of the lush and vibrant village of Maliza, there lived a young woman named Nefisa. She was not only breathtakingly beautiful, but also possessed a heart as pure as gold. Her kindness knew no bounds, and she was loved by everyone, young and old, rich and poor. When she walked through the village, the sun seemed to shine brighter, and even the birds paused to admire her radiant smile. Her laughter carried through the air like the sweetest melody, bringing joy to all who heard it. Nefisa's father, Chief Jabari, was a respected leader, known for his wisdom and strength. After the tragic passing of his beloved wife, the village elders convinced him to remarry, believing a woman's presence was needed to maintain balance in the household. And so, he took a new wife, Shadira, a woman who carried herself with grace, but harbored a heart filled with shadows. At first, she seemed to embrace Nefisa like a daughter, but beneath her warm smiles and soft words, a storm of envy raged. Everywhere she turned, Shadira saw the villagers' admiration for Nefisa. The men praised her beauty, the women adored her kindness, and even the children ran to her, eager for her affection. It didn't take long for Shadira to realize that no matter how fine her clothes were, or how sweetly she spoke, she would never be as cherished as Nefisa. And that thought alone poisoned her soul. Day by day, jealousy consumed her. She watched Nefisa from the corners of her eyes, studied the way people admired her, and her hatred deepened. Her own reflection in the mirror became unbearable. She saw the fine lines on her face, the fading glow of youth, and she despised Nefisa even more. It wasn't fair, she thought. Why should Nefisa have everything? Beauty, love, admiration, while she, Shadira, was merely a shadow in the background. Blinded by envy, she sought a forbidden path. Late one night, when the village was asleep, she wrapped herself in a dark cloak and made her way through the dense forest, her heart pounding with every step. She had heard whispers of a powerful sorceress, Mama Zaira, who lived deep within the forbidden woods, a woman feared by all, yet sought after by those desperate enough to trade their souls for their desires. Shadira reached the sorceress's hut, her breath shallow with fear and anticipation. Mama Zaira's eyes glowed like embers in the dim candlelight as she studied the trembling woman before her. Shadira spoke of her jealousy, her bitterness, her longing to strip Nefisa of her beauty and take it for herself. The sorceress listened in silence, then let out a slow, knowing smile. She agreed to help, but warned that dark magic always came with a price. Without hesitation, Shadira accepted. She was willing to do anything, risk everything, to become what Nefisa was. The sorceress performed an ancient ritual, her chants filling the night air. A thick, black mist wrapped around Shadira, seeping into her skin, filling her veins with darkness. The deal was made. The spell was cast. As Shadira left the forbidden woods, she felt a strange energy coursing through her body. She didn't know what the price of the spell would be. She didn't care. All she knew was that soon, Nefisa's beauty would be hers, and the village of Maliza would finally see her, love her, worship her. She smiled to herself, unaware that she had just sealed her own fate. Karma was watching, and it never forgot. The night was thick with darkness as Shadira wrapped herself in a black cloak and slipped away from the village. The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the towering trees as she made her way through the dense forest. Twigs snapped beneath her hurried steps, and the distant hoots of night creatures sent chills down her spine. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her mind was consumed with a single thought. She had to take Nefisa's beauty for herself. After what felt like an eternity, she reached a clearing where an old, crumbling hut stood. The air around it was thick with an unnatural mist, and the ground seemed to pulse beneath her feet. This was the home of Mama Zaira, the most feared sorceress in the land. Legends spoke of her dark magic, of desperate souls who came seeking power, only to disappear into the shadows forever. But Shadira didn't care about the warnings. She had made up her mind. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, and the flickering candlelight barely illuminated the room. At the center sat Mama Zaira, an ancient woman with eyes as black as the night. She stared at Shadira, as if she had been expecting her. "I know why you have come," the sorceress said in a voice that was neither loud nor soft, but powerful enough to send shivers through Shadira's bones. Shadira knelt before her. "I want Nefisa's beauty. I want it for myself." Mama Zaira let out a slow, raspy chuckle. "Beauty is not something you take without a price. Are you willing to pay?" Shadira's hands trembled, but her resolve did not waver. "I'll pay anything," she whispered. The sorceress studied her for a long moment, then rose to her feet. She moved to a wooden shelf lined with strange jars filled with dark liquid, bones, and dried plants. From one of them, she pulled out a small cracked bowl. She placed it in front of Shadira and began to chant in a language the younger woman did not understand. The air in the hut grew heavy, pressing down on Shadira's chest. Mama Zaira took out a small dagger and sliced her own palm, letting dark, thick blood drip into the bowl. She looked at Shadira with piercing eyes. "The spell requires a piece of your soul," she said. "Once done, there is no undoing it. You will never be the same." Shadira hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The sorceress reached for Shadira's hand, gripping it tightly. Suddenly, pain shot through her body, unlike anything she had ever felt before. It was as if something was being pulled from inside her, something she couldn't see but could feel tearing away. Her screams filled the hut, but Mama Zaira did not stop. The air around them swirled with dark smoke, and a sickening force filled the space. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the pain stopped. Shadira collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The sorceress stared down at her with a knowing smirk. "It is done," she said. "By sunrise, your beauty will shine like the stars, and Nefisa's will fade into dust." Shadira's heart pounded with excitement. Finally, she would have everything she ever wanted. She rose to her feet, feeling an unfamiliar energy coursing through her veins. But as she turned to leave, Mama Zaira's voice cut through the silence. "Remember," the sorceress warned, her tone grave. "No magic comes without consequences. You may think you have won, but the spirits are always watching. One day, the price of your greed will come for you." Shadira froze for a moment, her breath catching in her throat, but then she shook off the fear. She had what she came for. Nothing else mattered. Without another word, she stepped out of the hut and disappeared into the night, unaware that the darkness she had embraced would one day consume her completely. The morning sun rose over Maliza, casting golden rays across the land. Birds chirped, and the village bustled with life. But inside Nefisa's hut, an eerie silence hung in the air. She stirred in her sleep, stretching her arms as she prepared to rise for the day. But something felt strange. Her body felt heavier, her skin tingling as if it no longer belonged to her. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, but the moment she turned to the small mirror on the wall, a scream tore from her throat. Her hands trembled as she reached up to touch her face. The soft, smooth skin she had always known was gone. In its place were deep, rough scars, wrinkles that aged her beyond her years, and dark patches that made her look sickly and unrecognizable. Her lips quivered. Her breath came in short gasps. This was not her. This could not be her. Tears streamed down her face, but even those felt different, like they belonged to another person. Her cries echoed through the village, and soon, people gathered outside her hut, whispering in confusion. When she stepped out, draped in a shawl, hoping against hope that what she had seen in the mirror was an illusion, gasps and horrified murmurs spread like wildfire. "What happened to her?" an old woman whispered. "Is this truly Nefisa?" another voice questioned. "She was the most beautiful girl in Maliza," someone else said in disbelief. The villagers stared, some with pity, others with disgust. Even the children who once ran to her for stories and laughter hid behind their mothers, their eyes filled with fear. Nefisa's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She reached out, desperate for comfort, but the people stepped back, as if she carried a curse. And then, stepping forward with feigned concern, was Shadira. But she was not the same woman from the day before. Her skin, once dull and aged, now glowed with youth. Her hair, once thin and lifeless, now cascaded in thick, black waves. She looked breathtaking, almost unearthly in her beauty. The villagers turned their attention to her, their awe and admiration shining in their eyes. "It is a miracle," Shadira said, placing a hand over her heart, her voice dripping with false innocence. "I do not know how this has happened, but I woke up feeling different. The spirits must have blessed me." Gasps of amazement followed. "The gods have rewarded you," an elder declared. Shadira smiled humbly, as if she had done nothing to deserve this. She turned to Nefisa, her eyes filled with fake sympathy. "Oh, my dear child, what misfortune has fallen upon you?" she said, shaking her head dramatically. "Perhaps the gods have taken their favor away from you." The words sliced through Nefisa's soul like a dagger. She tried to speak, to defend herself, to tell them that something was wrong, but no one listened. The people who once adored her now looked upon her with suspicion. Even her father, Chief Jabari, hesitated before stepping forward. "This is beyond my understanding," he muttered. "The spirits must be angry. Perhaps she has been cursed." The words spread like wildfire. Cursed. Nefisa, the girl once adored, was now seen as an omen of bad luck. Women whispered behind their hands, men avoided her gaze, and children ran when she approached. The rejection burned worse than the scars on her face. Tears blurred her vision as she turned away, her once proud steps now shaky and unsure. The village she had called home, the people she had loved, had abandoned her in a single moment. There was nothing left for her here. With a heavy heart, she took one last look at Maliza and walked away, disappearing into the unknown, not knowing that destiny had far greater plans for her. Nefisa walked for days, her feet bruised and blistered, her body aching from exhaustion. The once proud daughter of Chief Jabari was now nothing more than a wandering outcast, shunned and forgotten. The scorching sun burned her skin by day, and the cold night air wrapped around her like a cruel embrace. Hunger gnawed at her belly, and thirst made her throat roar. She had lost everything: her beauty, her home, her family. The betrayal of her own people weighed heavily on her heart. She moved through dense forests, her weak body barely pushing through the thick vines and towering trees. Strange sounds filled the night: howls, rustling leaves, the distant cry of unseen creatures. Fear crept into her heart, but she had no choice but to keep walking. One evening, just as the last light of the sun dipped behind the mountains, Nefisa collapsed near a small stream. She had no more strength to move. She closed her eyes, welcoming the darkness, ready to surrender to whatever fate had in store. But before she could drift into unconsciousness, she heard footsteps approaching. An old man with wise, gentle eyes and a staff carved from ancient wood knelt beside her. He wore a robe made of woven herbs, and his presence carried a strange sense of peace. He studied her face, his eyes dark with understanding. "You have been touched by a cruel spell," the old man murmured, running his fingers lightly over the scars on her face. "The work of dark magic." Nefisa's eyes fluttered open. For the first time since her curse, someone was not looking at her with disgust or fear. Instead, there was kindness in his gaze. Tears filled her eyes. "Please, help me," she whispered, her voice weak. The old man nodded. "Come, child, you have suffered enough." With surprising strength, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to his home, a small hut hidden deep in the heart of the forest. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of healing herbs, dried leaves hanging from the ceiling, and strange powders resting in small clay bowls. A fire crackled warmly in the corner. He introduced himself as Elder Kijana, a herbalist and healer who had spent his life understanding the forces of nature. As days passed, Nefisa regained her strength under his care. He gave her herbal teas to cleanse her body, healing oils to soothe her skin, and nourishing food to bring life back into her weary frame. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Kijana looked at her with deep thought. "This curse was not meant to break you," he said. "It was meant to awaken something within you." Nefisa frowned. "Awaken what?" The old man smiled knowingly. "Strength, knowledge, power that has been hidden inside you all along." He began to teach her about herbs and their healing properties, about the energy that flowed through all living things, and the balance between good and evil. He showed her how to listen to the whispers of the wind, the secrets of the water, and the wisdom of the earth. For the first time since she had left Maliza, Nefisa felt a spark of hope. She realized she was not just a victim of fate, she was a survivor. She had the power to rise again, and deep in her heart, she made a silent promise. One day, she would return, but when she did, she would not return as the broken girl they cast away. She would return stronger than ever, ready to reclaim what was stolen from her. Under Elder Kijana's guidance, Nefisa's days were no longer filled with sorrow, but with discovery. She learned to listen to the whispers of the wind, to feel the energy pulsing through the earth beneath her feet, and to sense the unseen forces that moved through the world. Elder Kijana spoke of balance, of how light and darkness must coexist, but also of how darkness, when fueled by greed, could corrupt and destroy. One evening, as the fire crackled in the center of the hut, Elder Kijana placed a small bowl of water before her. "Look into it," he instructed. "Let your spirit guide you." Nefisa hesitated, staring at the still surface of the water. But as she focused, a strange sensation washed over her. Her vision blurred, and the flickering flames around her seemed to fade away. Suddenly, images began to appear in the water. Twisted, shadowy figures moving through the darkness. A woman cloaked in envy, a sorceress weaving a wicked spell, a vial of glowing liquid. Then she saw herself, her own beauty, draining from her face like water slipping through fingers. And standing above her, laughing in cruel triumph, was Shadira. Nefisa gasped and yanked herself away from the vision, her heart pounding. She looked at Elder Kijana with wide, horrified eyes. "It was her," she whispered. "Shadira stole my beauty." The old man nodded solemnly. "The truth has finally revealed itself to you." Nefisa's hands trembled with anger and betrayal. She had always felt there was something unnatural about what happened to her, but now she knew. It was never a curse from the gods. It was never fate. It was the doing of a jealous woman who could not bear to see her shine. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of fury, of determination, of a fire that had been reignited deep within her soul. She clenched her fists. "She took everything from me," she said, her voice firm, "but I will not let her keep it." Elder Kijana studied her for a long moment before giving a small nod. "Then it is time." Nefisa straightened, wiping away the last remnants of weakness from her face. She was no longer the broken girl who had been cast away in disgrace. She was no longer the helpless child who wandered the forests in despair. She was stronger now, wiser. She had learned the ways of nature, the power within herself, and the truth behind the lies that had stolen her life. And now it was time to take it all back. As the first light of dawn stretched across the sky, Nefisa stood at the edge of the forest, gazing in the direction of Maliza. Her heart pounded with purpose. She had left the village as an outcast, shunned and humiliated, but she would return as something else. She would return as the storm that would wash away the evil. She would return as justice itself. Shadira had spent months basking in the admiration of the villagers, delighting in her newfound beauty and youth. But one morning, as she gazed into the mirror, a cold fear gripped her heart. The smooth, radiant skin she had stolen was beginning to dull. A faint line appeared near the corner of her eye. The glow that once made her the envy of Maliza was dimming. Panic surged through her veins. She could not lose this beauty. She could not go back to being ordinary. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. Desperate, she covered the imperfections with fine oils and powders. But no matter what she did, the magic was slipping away. Whispers began to spread. "Is it just me? Or does Shadira look different?" Some villagers murmured. "She doesn't shine like before." Fear clawed at her. She needed to act fast. There was only one person who could fix this. That night, cloaked in darkness, she made her way back to the forbidden forest, her heart pounding with dread. The air was thick with an eerie silence, and the wind carried strange whispers as she approached Mama Zaira's hut. The old sorceress was waiting, her wrinkled face twisted into a knowing smirk as Shadira stepped inside. "You come crawling back," Mama Zaira rasped. "I warned you, didn't I?" Shadira fell to her knees, her breath shaking. "The spell is weakening. Tell me how to fix it." Mama Zaira chuckled darkly, her yellowed nails tapping against the wooden table. "Ah, beauty stolen is beauty borrowed, and borrowed things must be paid for." She leaned in, her eyes gleaming with wicked delight. "The magic is hungry. It needs a greater sacrifice." Shadira swallowed hard. "Tell me what to do." Mama Zaira's smile widened, her voice turning to a whisper. "Your son." Shadira's breath caught in her throat. "What?" "The blood of your own flesh," Mama Zaira said. "The spell demands the purest sacrifice. If you wish to keep your beauty, you must give up your son." Shadira's body went rigid. Her son, her only child, the boy she had carried in her womb, the one who looked up at her with innocent eyes. She had done many terrible things, but this was unthinkable. "No," she breathed. "Anything else. Take my gold, my soul, but not my child." Mama Zaira shrugged. "Then your beauty will rot away, and soon everyone will see the monster you truly are." Terror coursed through Shadira. She clenched her fists, her mind racing. But no matter how much she loved her beauty, she could not bring herself to sacrifice her son. She turned and ran. As she fled through the dark forest, she felt the magic unraveling inside her. Her skin itched. Her bones ached. She stumbled, her breath ragged, as the spell continued to break apart. By the time she reached the village, she felt weaker than ever. The darkness she had embraced was turning against her, and she knew this was only the beginning. As the sun dipped behind the hills of Maliza, casting golden hues across the village, a lone figure emerged from the horizon. Clad in a flowing robe, her posture tall and unshaken, Nefisa walked with a presence that seemed almost ethereal. Her once scarred face now radiated a quiet power, a divine glow that made the villagers pause in their evening routines. Murmurs spread like wildfire. "Is that Nefisa?" someone gasped. "But she was cursed. She was gone." The villagers gathered, eyes wide with disbelief. The girl they had cast away, the girl whose beauty had been stolen, stood before them, not just as the Nefisa they had known, but as something greater. There was wisdom in her gaze, strength in her stride, and an undeniable force surrounding her. Shadira, watching from the doorway of Chief Jabari's home, felt her stomach twist. A cold sweat broke out on her skin. She had believed Nefisa was gone forever, doomed to a life of suffering. How was she standing here, looking powerful? Nefisa's voice rang clear through the village, carrying an authority she had never possessed before. "You all saw me leave this village in disgrace. You believed I had been cursed, but the truth is far worse." The villagers hung on her every word. "My beauty was stolen from me," Nefisa continued. "Taken through dark magic." She turned to Shadira, her piercing gaze locking onto her stepmother. "And the thief stands among you." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. All eyes turned to Shadira. Shadira forced a laugh, though her hands trembled. "This is madness, lies and jealousy. You were cursed, Nefisa. How dare you return with such accusations?" But the villagers were not fools. They had seen Shadira's unnatural beauty, how it had come suddenly, how it had started to fade in recent days. And now, standing before them, was Nefisa, restored, radiant, and untouched by whatever fate had been meant for her. Then, before their very eyes, it began. Shadira clutched her face as a sharp pain shot through her body. Her skin, once smooth and youthful, began to wrinkle at an alarming speed. Her hair, thick and dark, thinned into brittle strands. Her hands, once delicate, twisted into the frail hands of an old woman. "No! No!" she shrieked, stumbling backward. The villagers gasped in horror. The magic was unraveling. The stolen beauty was returning to its rightful owner, and Shadira was left with nothing but the reflection of her own wickedness. As the last traces of the dark magic disappeared, a warm golden light surrounded Nefisa. The villagers gasped as they watched the transformation unfold before their eyes. Her scarred and withered skin began to glow, the deep lines of suffering fading away. Her radiant beauty returned, even more breathtaking than before. Her eyes sparkled with newfound wisdom. Her hair flowed like a river of silk, and her presence carried an undeniable aura of strength. The whispers turned to cheers. The people of Maliza fell to their knees in awe, realizing that the spirits had restored what was rightfully hers. It was not just her beauty that had returned, it was her power, her dignity, and her place among them. Chief Jabari, who had been standing in stunned silence, suddenly dropped his staff and rushed toward Nefisa. His eyes were filled with sorrow and regret. "My daughter, my child, I failed you." His voice trembled as he reached for her hands, tears streaming down his face. "I should have protected you. I should have believed you." For a moment, there was silence. The entire village held its breath, waiting for Nefisa's response. Would she turn away? Would she reject the father who had cast her aside? But Nefisa, with the heart of a true leader, placed her hands over his. "Father," she said gently, "what is done cannot be undone, but we must learn from it. Pain has shaped me, but it has not broken me. I forgive you." A wave of emotion rippled through the crowd. Even those who had doubted her felt the weight of her words. Her kindness, despite everything she had endured, made her more powerful than any magic. The elders of the village stepped forward, bowing their heads in respect. "Nefisa, you have shown strength beyond measure," one of them declared. The spirits have chosen you. You have been tested by suffering and emerged as a true leader. The people cheered, chanting her name. Nefisa, once cast out in disgrace, now stood as a symbol of resilience and justice. With wisdom in her heart and the love of her people, Nefisa vowed to rule not with vengeance, but with compassion. She would make Maliza a place where no one suffered unjustly as she had, where truth would always triumph over deception. The sun set behind her, casting a golden glow over the village. And as she stood tall, she knew this was only the beginning of a new era, one where she would lead with strength, kindness, and the wisdom of the spirits. The story of Nefisa became one that would be told for generations. The village of Maliza, once blind to the dangers of jealousy and dark magic, now carried a lesson deep within its heart. Parents warned their children, elders spoke with wisdom, and young girls grew up knowing that true beauty was not in the face, but in the heart. The tale of Nefisa was not just about suffering and redemption. It was about the power of truth, the strength of kindness, and the certainty that no evil deed goes unpunished. As Nefisa ruled with wisdom and compassion, she made sure that no one in Maliza ever faced the cruelty she had endured. She built a place where every girl was valued, where no one was cast aside because of lies and envy. People traveled from faraway lands to hear her speak, to learn from her, to seek her guidance. Her name carried power, but it was not the kind that came from magic. It was the power of a woman who had faced darkness and emerged stronger. Meanwhile, Shadira, once admired for her stolen beauty, now wandered as a forgotten soul. Her face, cursed beyond recognition, made people recoil in fear. She had no home, no family, no love. The villagers who once bowed before her now turned away in disgust. She begged for food, but no hand stretched out to help her. She pleaded for mercy, but none came. The very beauty she had sacrificed everything for had been ripped away, leaving her with nothing but regret and misery. On quiet nights, the wind carried whispers through the trees, voices of the spirits repeating the warning that Maliza would never forget. Karma never forgets. It watches, it waits, and when the time is right, it delivers justice. And so, the story of Nefisa was passed down, not as a simple tale, but as a warning, a lesson, a promise that truth and goodness would always triumph. And in the hearts of young girls, a fire burned bright, a fire that would never allow them to be silenced, never allow them to be broken, and never allow them to forget who they truly were. My dear viewers, Nefisa's story is not just a tale. It is a lesson for all of us. A lesson that no matter how much darkness tries to steal your light, the truth will always shine through. A lesson that no amount of jealousy, no act of evil, can ever destroy the spirit of a pure heart. How many times have we seen good people suffer while the wicked seem to thrive? How many times have we questioned if justice will ever be served? But Nefisa's journey reminds us, karma never forgets. It may take time, but in the end, the wicked will always fall, and the innocent will rise again. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel the power of truth and justice, then don't let it end here. Share this message with the world. Let more people hear Nefisa's story. Let more hearts be inspired to never give up, to never lose hope, and to always believe in the power of good. Like this video, share it with your loved one, and subscribe to the channel so that more powerful stories like this reach you. Your support means everything, and together, we can spread messages that change lives. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in truth. And remember, karma sees everything.